we're going to be talking about value placement, and we're going to get into purpose, right? Why it matters to have value placement, why it matters to see things and perceive things as something more valuable, less valuable. Real quick, you want to add anything to that before I just hop off? You have a story to share.
Share it. Share it.
All right. You guys might have not heard this story before. It's a good one. It's good. Okay. It's a good way and intro to actually perceiving value and see how other people perceive value. So, backstory is there's a fisherman, right? He's got a beautiful family. He loves his family. And he lives on an island, and he goes fishing. I mean, that's his occupation, is to fish. He's a fisherman. And, he lives on this island. He goes to the beach and fishes every day. He goes home. He gets to spend time with his wife. He gets to play with his kids, and he gets to hang out in town with his friends. And so one day, just a normal day for him, he goes out fishing. He's out fishing just like he normally is. And in town, on that island, there's a businessman, and he comes to that beach just to eat lunch. And as he's fishing, the businessman is watching and is impressed by his catches. He's making good catches of fish. And so what happens is that, fisherman finishes up, docks his boat, brings his boat back in, starts, reeling up his nets and sorting the fish out. And so the businessman comes up to him and says, "Hey, I'm impressed with your catch. Right? Great catch. I'm impressed. What are you going to do next?" And the fisherman says, "Well, I'm going to go into town and sell my fish." And so then the businessman says, "Then what are you going to do?" The fisherman looks at him and he's like, "Then I'm going to go home and play with my kids." And the businessman's like, "Then what?" And fisherman says, "Then I'm going to spend time with my wife." Businessman again goes, "Okay, then what?" Fisherman says, "Then I'm going to go into town, I'm going to hang out with my friends." Businessman is like, "I'm a businessman. You know what I would do? You know what you should do is you should go back out after, fish some more, catch even more fish, and then maybe you can hire somebody, and they could start working for you. And so you can catch even more and make even more from that. And then you could get a whole fleet of boats, maybe get a business." And so the fisherman looks at him and he goes, thinks for a bit, he goes, "Okay, then what?" The businessman says, "Well, then you could, buy your wife fancy things, buy your kids fancy things, even your friends. Maybe you can live in this big city and be a publicly traded company, right, and have all this wealth." Fisherman looks at him again and nods. He's like, "Okay, then what?" And so the businessman says, "Well, then you could, retire with all this wealth." Fisherman looks at him again and goes, "Oh, then what do I do after that?" Businessman says, "Well, I guess you go fishing, whenever you want. And, then you get to spend time with your kids, play with your kids, spend time with your wife. And then go into town and hang out with your friends." So, see two different perspectives. Who do you think's right?
In a way, they both are.
How come you think they're both right?
I don't know. Just they can both benefit from that. The way the guy was advertising, "Oh, if you catch more fish, you can turn it into a business."
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that point of view right there, that could be right, or
Right. Okay.
yeah, I can see how you could benefit from that.
Anybody else? Perspective? The whole point is they had two different ideas of what they wanted to achieve. Right? And the whole point, I don't want it to mean one or the other. Right? But they have a vision. And some have more value for one. Like the businessman had more value for making wealth, creating a business, and the fisherman had more value for his family, spending time with his kids and his wife and his friends. Right? And we decide that all the time. We have to. Right? Because whatever we decide, whatever we spend our time doing, we're also spending our time, we're not spending our time doing something else. And so the whole point is things have value. All your decisions have an amount of value to them because you're trading. Every choice we make is a negotiation. It's a trade for time. If you think about, baseball cards, why are they valuable? Why are baseball cards valuable?
Because they're based on players in real life who actually have a really good reputation.
Okay, and then why else could they be valuable? Maybe because there's not so many, right? That can make it more valuable because there's not this unlimited amount of baseball cards. What would happen is the value would go down since they're everywhere. So same thing, if you think about our time and energy, right? Our energy is going to run out. Our time is going to run out. So every choice we're making, we're trading our time and energy for that. And a man of high value is going to look at his decisions, just like a clerk in a thrift shop is going to look at two materials and measure the weight and value. What's more valuable choice to pursue? What's a more valuable way to trade my time, spend my time? Right? What do I want to be pursuing? Because I'm not going to get this time or energy back. And that's what you're doing. You're using that time and energy. So when we make decisions, what we should be doing is assessing. What's more valuable? What's a valuable choice here? What type of decision should I make? And to think in that way, right, we get to step back a little bit and look at things differently. So we can make wiser, better decisions. So we can spend our time productively rather than counterproductively. Because we don't get that time back. We don't get that energy back. So everything, it has worth to it, right? And see it as its worth. So I'm going to hand it off to Andrew, because I know you want to refine, especially some stuff on value placement and where you place your value.
Thank you for an excellent introduction. We're talking about value, right? Where we place value. Why is that important? Well, because, like Daniel said, we have a limited amount of time, we have a limited amount of energy. Not necessarily limited, but it's set. You don't know when you're going to die, so you don't want to waste time, right? Resources are valuable if you place value on them. But some important notes to take from value placement. The first thing I want to point out is that when it comes to value, we get to choose what we put value on. And a lot of times we do that subconsciously. We're not aware of what we're putting value on. You know the best way to figure out what you're putting value on? I'll bet you're familiar with the saying, actions speak louder than words. Nice. Why? I'll tell you why. Because people say, well, if you say something and you don't do it, well, your actions speak for you, right? But it goes deeper than that. Your actions speak louder than words because your actions show other people and yourselves what you put value in, what you place value on. I don't believe it was until recently, within the last 100 years, that behavioral psychology was developed and understood. What is behavioral psychology? Well, it's watching people's behavior to learn about people. What does our behavior tell us about each other? That's such a powerful tool that you have, is to look at your own behavior, to become conscious of your actions, because it tells you what you're putting value on. If you say, my family's important to me, but you don't make time for your family, or you do, but you don't make much time, okay, is it important to you? Do you really hold, your family to a high value? What really is held to a high value is the thing you make the most time for, Most people make the most time for work. They hold work to a high value. Why? Because they need money. They need to live. All right? That's reasonable. That's understandable. But as you as you look at yourself, if you have the courage to look at yourself, because it takes courage to do that. It takes courage to stop judging others, right? We know it's easier to see the plank in someone else's eye, or the splinter in someone else's eye before we see the plank in our own, right? That's just saying it's very difficult for us as humans to look at ourselves and our own actions, right? To stop worrying about other people's stuff, to mind our own business, and literally mind our own business. So when we look at our actions and see what our behaviors tell us, we're able to figure out where we place value. Why is it important to figure out where we place value? Well, because the interesting thing about where we place value is we're able to figure out if it's a good thing or a bad thing that we're putting value in, assuming we can distinguish right from wrong, which to some degree we've been gifted with the ability to do just that. But that's important because we're able to look at ourselves to see the things we're making time for, to say, is that something I should be making time for? Is there something more important that I should be prioritizing higher than that? Which we do this all the time. We make this mistake all the time. You know, there's plenty of examples. Honestly, I'm not going to use one because I think you understand that. But again, why is that important? Well, because if you want to be a virtuous individual, or maybe even before that goal, you'd rather simply be a person who uses your time efficiently and does good for yourself, well, then you need to be able to see what you're prioritizing. If you're not eating good, you're eating all the time, but you're not eating good, you're placing a lot of value on how much time you spend eating. You're obese, right? Let's say that. Here I am using an example anyway. Oh, well. If you become obese, you can see that food is a priority. You're making too much time for food to the point where it's not helping you. You know, Fernando talked about the golden mean, right? He talked about not going in excess to too much or too little. Our ability to look at our actions using techniques like behavioral psychology enables us to see where we're placing our value. And if we're spending too much of our precious time consuming, that shows. We can see it in physical reality by looking at our actions and by looking at the physical reality around us, which our actions help create. But why is it important additionally to understand value placement? Well, because where we place our value is what helps us aim towards things. Jordan Peterson discusses this. He says, as human beings, we are aiming creatures. We kind of touched on this a little bit earlier, too. We have a process about going about things. And a lot of times we don't even notice it. It's very subconscious. It's just part of our nature. We've done it so many times habitually and perpetually that it's just a motion. It's just another motion, which a lot of our motions are like that. But what we do is we see where we're at, we see where we want to go, and we start moving there. We do it all the time. I'm at my house. I wish I was at my friend's house, and I drive, right? Location A, location B, and shoot, right? But that has a greater significance than you realize. Because location A is seeing yourself where you're at. That's taking a genuine look in the mirror, looking at your behavioral psychology, the way you're acting, seeing what we're putting value in, whether it's good or bad, right? We are genuinely looking in the mirror and reflecting on our behavior. We are reflecting on ourselves. That's very important. We are being very real with ourselves and seeing, where am I? Where am I in life? Am I in a bad place? Am I surrounded by bad people who shouldn't be my friends that I'm letting into my friend group? Am I in a bad area? Am I in the middle of a war zone, right? We're being very realistic. It goes beyond our own behavior. And it comes down to taking everything into account, our behavior and the external environment around us. Where am I? So we see where we are. And the more clearly you see where you are, the better you can benefit from that. And I'll explain how shortly. Then we see where we want to go. We aim. We pick a target. All right? You see where you're at. Let's use the example of the war zone, right? Here you are in the middle of a battle. You don't want to be in a battle. It's dangerous, all right? You're like, I wish I was at home, safe and sound. There's your goal. Now you have a goal. Then what do? You develop a plan. You say, how am I going to get from point A to point B? You know, when you develop a plan, you typically do it in a certain style. You know, you want to do it quickly, you want to do it safely, you want to do it efficiently with as little resources as possible. You know, if it doesn't have to take you 3 weeks to get home, you're not going to let it take you 3 weeks to get home. And then you take action. So on top of the 3 steps of A, B, and move, there's also an additional 3 steps that very similarly overlap, which is aim, plan, take action. We do that all the time. We act that out as a part. Those 2 are intertwined very closely. What does that have to do with value, though? Well, because our value is what helps us choose our aim. If you didn't hold being in a safe location, specifically home, to a high value, you wouldn't make that your destination. If you really wanted to be in a war zone, let's say you placed your value on being the leader of one of those 2 sides. You'd take yourself out of the war zone and find where the leader is and pick up the sword or whatever and lead the charge, right? So our values are oriented towards our goals. We use what we hold valuable to us. Maybe we hold safety and comfort valuable. Maybe we hold being a leader or being in the front or being in charge, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be a good trait. It could be a bad trait. It could be being on top or something of high value. Then that becomes our goal. So our values very closely help us choose our goals. But again, our goals could be bad. If our values aren't any good, our goals aren't going to be any good either. So it's important to be aware that we want to have good goals. And if our goals aren't good, our values probably aren't good either. And what we place value in probably is misaligned. If you really want a good example, you can look at Germany, right? Hitler was a powerful man. He was a very influential man. But his goals weren't good, not by most people's standards. And his values, what he placed value on, what he prioritized and held as significant, wasn't very good either. Not by most people's opinion at any rate. But by his, it was different. You know, we talked about perception. So it's important to be able to distinguish that, because as a man, we're called to be virtuous. As a human, we're called to be virtuous. But we're men, and as men, we're called to focus on ourselves and to be virtuous. And so part of being virtuous is to have good values and place value on good things, which helps us make good goals for ourselves. And that's a beautiful thing, is because we're already aiming naturally, right? I talked about that. We're already naturally aiming. We're already setting goals. So why don't we become more conscious of the goals we set? Why don't we actually set good goals? Some of us have. Some of us are doing it right now. Some of us don't, right? Some of us, we waste more time than we should. We prioritize things that really aren't that important, or that really shouldn't have as much, we shouldn't be giving as much value as we do. But it's important to have good goals. It moves us towards that state of virtue. When you're financially stable, you're able to be generous. You're able to take some of your money and give it to others. You're able to take some of your time and give it to others because you don't have to worry about working, maybe, depending on how financially stable you are. When you take good care of your health, you're able to help other people. You're able to take the knowledge you've learned taking care of your health and share it to other people, right? That's charitable. That's a charitable act. And then, gosh, I'm drawing a blank. What? Cure. Yep. I mean, that's self-explanatory. I don't need to tell you how that helps people, right? That's a very selfless action in itself. And being selfless is virtuous, right? It's a demonstration of charity also, which is the greatest virtue. Charity is an act of love. And so you guys all just gave yourselves and me and everybody else a glimpse of what you hold valuable. And they're all great values, right? But it's important for goal setting because we want to pick good goals. We want to pick good things towards aiming at to bring us closer to being virtuous. Now, did you have anything you want to add before I slide into the next?
Slide into it.
All right. Why is it super important to have goals? Well, one, like I said, we're aiming creatures, right? And two, it gives us meaning. It gives us meaning to our life. Right? You're in a harbor. You got a boat. You're sitting in a harbor. Envision this. Close your eyes if you got it. You are sitting in your own little dinghy in the middle of Boston Harbor. If you don't go anywhere, if you sit there, the tide's going to move you. The tide's going to have its way with you. The tide is the world. It's going to have its way with you. Hopefully, it'll pull you out to safety, but probably not. It'll probably bash you against a pier or overflow your boat with big waves or bring you into the middle of an expensive marina and drive you into someone else's boat. Even if you sit there, let's say you drop the anchor and hold yourself there, you're safe, right? Nonsense. People are still passing you. People are getting ahead of you in life because you're not going anywhere. But what happens if you have a destination and you actually take action? That's a word worth writing down. Taking action. Let's say you're in the middle of the harbor. You know it's not good to sit still. You know that even if you drop an anchor, it doesn't matter because boats at anchor can still be overwhelmed by the state of the sea when they're not being fluid with it. There's danger in being anchored. Let's say you decide to set a goal. You decide, I want to get out of the harbor. This is where I can't emphasize enough the importance of being specific. It's good to say, I'm in the middle of the harbor. I want to get out of the harbor and get into the bay, right? But there's more to it than that, right? There's all sorts of things that you, without realizing it, go into planning all these things, right? Do you have a map? Do you have a plan to get out of the harbor? That plan involves the map. That plan involves understanding the channel. Maybe it involves having a pilot on board your boat to pilot you through this specific channel because maybe you don't know Boston Harbor. That plan involves knowing where danger spots are as you navigate out. That plan involves knowing the weather, what it's like on the outside of the harbor versus the inside, because most harbors have ways of preventing big waves from coming in. Right? There's so much. But the nice thing is, if you have a destination, you're a lot more safe, like the boat without the rudder. If you're going somewhere and you're aiming towards it, it's better than going nowhere, because at least you're moving out of the harbor. There could be danger. Things happen, right? We understand plans are made and they have to be reconstructed. What do they say? A man plans, God laughs, right? It happens, all right? But it's important that you make that plan and that make that target, aim towards it. Process of aiming is writing your plan out, and then you take action. Sometimes you got to reevaluate your plan, upgrade it, etc. But that's incredibly important. Again, like I said, the more specific the goal, the better. The more you can clearly define it, the more you can clearly vision it in your head, the more likely it is to come true. So, let's talk about purpose. Great mention, thank you. That was where I was going next. A purpose is like a goal. That's why I started by introducing you to goals. But I also started, if you recall, Daniel, in this case, started introducing you to value, right? And it's a combination of both. Just like your goals are something you value, hopefully. Most people don't prioritize something and aim towards it if they don't hold it a value. The same goes for your purpose. It's very similar to a goal. It's something you strive after. But what is it? Your purpose is more life-fulfilling, and it's necessary. One of my favorite coaches that I've ever met, or I haven't met him personally. I wish. I can only dream. And Daniel's familiar with him. Corey Wayne, he talks about the importance of having a purpose. Now, Corey, he's a relationship kind of guy. He knows a lot about relationships, right? And he says how important it is to have a purpose as a man in terms of relationship success. But it goes beyond that. Purpose is incredibly important because it benefits your life. But it goes even more beyond that too. it benefits other people's lives. And that's what your purpose should be. You should have a purpose because a person who accepts their purpose is someone who's looking for a way to give back in life. We haven't actually done the gratitude exercise yet. But here's the thing. We talked about how it's important to be grateful. We talked about how we want to be blessed, right? And how the more we focus on what's been given to us, the more we realize lots has been given, right? We notice that we're actually in a position of almost debt, so to speak, right? We kind of owe a lot to other people. We owe a lot to our families, our parents, our communities that have done so much to bring us up and raise us. We owe a lot to whatever source you believe has brought you to this earth, right? In my case, God. I owe a lot to God for bringing me here, for making me human, giving me all this beautiful stuff, right? I'm at the top of the food chain, like Fernando mentioned earlier. Well, so that technically puts me in debt, right? That's the nice thing, is life doesn't rush you. Life lets you discover this on your own. It lets you take your time about it. You know, it's not your landlord who's knocking on your door at the end of the month asking you to pay up. You could get through life without paying. But we're talking about virtue, and that wouldn't be very virtuous to do that, especially if we're aware that we have a responsibility to give back. So then the question is, how do we give back? What do we do to give back? Well, that's where it becomes specific. That's where it becomes personal to your unique selves as individuals. What is it that you have to offer to the world? And what is it that you see the world needs filled? Where's the gap in the puzzle of the world that you see that you think should be filled? Are you working to fill it? That's what your purpose is. It is a goal, but it's a goal above all other goals, and it's a goal that is selfless. It's a goal that, when prioritized, benefits the world, gives back to the world. Because, also like Fernando pointed out, we're meant to share life. And life isn't easily shared with people who aren't willing to give. You aren't very inclined to want to invite the family member who doesn't bring gifts and only expects to get them. Or the friend either. You know, the friend who shows up and eats all the food and doesn't hang out or contribute to the conversation or bring anything to the party, you know. Those are people you don't hang out with. So we understand, when we really think about it, that we are here to give. We should be giving in some way. And that's part of sharing life. And that's part of aligning yourself with your purpose. When you align yourself with your purpose, you fill the part of the world that only you can fill. The lack of your best hurts everything. Our failure to strive for our purpose hurts everything. We look around us and we can see in our society, it's hell. The economy is crap. There's nobody my age who wouldn't say that. Families are falling apart. Infrastructure is falling apart. If you decide to be conscious and aware of these things and look around, you'll see it. It's there. And I'll tell you what that is that's the lack of people giving their best. That's the lack of people, that's an abundance of people, rather, who are, bless you, refusing to seek out their purpose and to shoulder it. But there's another problem. What if you don't know what your purpose is? What if you agree with me, you believe you have a purpose that you need to fulfill, but you don't know what it is? What do? You take your best guess and you take action. That's why goals are important. Because even if you don't know how you can give back to the world, what you do is you continually take action towards other smaller virtuous goals. And you continually align your life through the use of goal setting with things that you hold of value. You're good at something, then you try to become better at it. And eventually, and again, like we talked about with opportunity, how if you open the door, it'll come in. It'll present itself. You just have to look. You have to permit it to present itself, and you have to look for it. If you do that with your purpose, I guarantee you life will help you discover it. Life will help you figure it out. But in the meantime, if you're not sure what it is, you have to constantly do your best to align yourself with what you suspect it could be. And sometimes it'll change. Sometimes you might spend 20 years working a career where you're giving it your everything, and you're really giving to society or to your community, and it changes, and you decide it's time to leave that job and pick up another job. But the beautiful thing about your purpose is this is a lifelong mission. It doesn't end at retirement. This isn't necessarily something you do to make money. It doesn't have to be. It could be anything. That's the amazing thing about purpose that makes it complex. It could be anything. And so, if you're on earth constantly being blessed, then you should also be on earth constantly seeking to give back. And that doesn't end with retirement. It really wasn't until like the 1960s, if I had to guess, that retirement really became it was an opportunity, a blessing of the society we'd constructed. But it had probably only ever been a dream for the longest time. Daniel, you look like you got something to say.
Yeah, you want to finish up your thought?
Yes. So I say that because, well, I'll tell you a quick story. My grandfather was a great guy. His name was John. He was my dad's father, right? And my dad would always, I loved him. Everybody loved him. He was a great man. And so my dad would always go, yeah, my dad, he always played baseball with us as kids. He always spent time with us as kids, yada, yada, yada. And it was fantastic, right? And one day my mom presented something, just a different point of view, right? A different perspective. And she said, well, that's good what he did, but why did he stop? He never played baseball with any of his grandkids. He never played baseball with the community. Like, he never went beyond his own family. And that's the thing, is just because we have a direct responsibility doesn't mean we can't go beyond it, right? Just because you're no longer a father doesn't mean, and this is for everybody. We happen to have a grandfather here, but you're all going to be grown men, possibly with children, possibly grandparents, right? And there's a bigger theme to this than making it personally as a father. And that's, it doesn't end with your offspring. It doesn't end with your job. It goes beyond that. It goes into the community and then into the world, right? Daniel has a story, a metaphor of the overflowing cup, right? And it continually pours into other people's cups. That's it. It's like, just because you raised your children doesn't mean you're done. Just because you worked your 40 years at your job doesn't mean you're done in life. It keeps going.
Affect that. Yeah, for sure. 100%. I want to mention what you said about being exact, about having details about a goal, and how the more details you have, the more likely you're to achieve that goal. So we're talking about purpose. We could talk all day about how good purpose is, right?
Important.
Exactly. Well, I'm thinking of this word. It's an invasive word, but it's a necessary question to ask. And that's why, right? Why is it important? Why should I pursue a purpose? Why do I need one? Why is it helping me? And so when you think about these questions, it's good to look at the alternative. The alternative to not having a purpose. And I love the mention that Andrew talked about, how, if you're a boat and you're getting out of the harbor, you have a destination, or you're sailing. And so if you don't have a destination, what happens is you're just drifting. Right? And the clock's still ticking, right? And just like I said before, there's value to time and energy. And so time keeps going. Right? Energy, you're expending energy still. So what's happened is it's an unproductive use to your time. And what happens is you're likely to end up somewhere where you don't want to be. And so I'm going to be walking over you. We keep switching.
We've already been walking over each other. Just watch the time.
Okay.
Keep going.
So without a purpose, we're likely going to drift and end up somewhere possibly we're going to regret ending up. And so, and even later on, if we're like, okay, we have a destination. If I finally came up with a destination of where I want to go, now we have to maybe make up for time. And so turn around the boat and go there, right? And so when you have a purpose, when you have a mission, when you have a goal, what's happening is every day's worth it. You know, you're waking up, you're inching closer and closer and closer to where you want to be. And so you're using that time productively. And so, you know, when they say Rome wasn't built in a day, right? Same thing. Your purpose, your achievements didn't happen in a day. Right? It's every day at a time. You're building towards something, right? Then your life actually becomes more meaningful. So you're adding meaning to your life. So you actually wake up with motivation. You wake up with a mission to actually accomplish something, because now your life matters even more than before, because you're actually part of something else, or you're part of creating something, making something happen. So every day counts. And so people see that too. So you're valuing yourself. You feel more value in yourself because your life has meaning to it, has a plan to it. There's a purpose for you being here, right? While choosing a purpose.
I'm going to interrupt.
Yeah, real quick.
Just like we talked about how it's the process of getting to that goal that gives us satisfaction, right? We enjoy the aiming, the striving portion. It's the same thing, you know.
Right.
The striving
exactly.
for your purpose gives you meaning.
Yes, yeah. And then you're building on top and on top. Now, you feel more valuable. Other people perceive you as more valuable because you're giving, you're producing something, right? Every day you're waking up, you became an asset, not just a liability, right? You're not just someone who needs to be fed. You're not just someone who, you know, needs to get their rest, right? And fill out all these different needs. You're someone who's actually giving back. You're someone who's actually being productive with their time and energy. So we have that choice to choose, you know, what's valuable, to spend more time productively or spend more time unproductively. And the big question that pops up is, okay, now, you know, I know it's good to have purpose. I know it's good to have a direction in my life, right? But the big question, where should I go? What should I do? What should I pursue? What should my purpose be? And this is normal where you ask people, you know, where do you want to be in the next 10, 15, 20 years? And they'll give you, you know, they might have to think about it a little bit.
Or they won't know.
Or exactly, yep, exactly. They might not know. And so that's normal. That's fine, right? To not know that. I mean, you go out to eat and it happens where you're ordering food and you're like, oh, wait a second, give us more time. I have to think a minute. I got to decide what I want to eat, right? You're not going to know your purpose on the top of your head. Very unlikely. And as men, that would be very convenient to just be like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. You know, I have a plan. I have a purpose. It feels fulfilling. I'm motivated to do it. And so that's not always going to happen. And that's okay. Right? So we need to take another step back and think, okay, now what can I do? Right? Should I spend some time to think about this? Right? How do I evaluate this question of what should I be pursuing right now? What should my goal or my purpose be? And so it's kind of like, I like to think about it as your conscious and your subconscious mind are like figuring it out. What do I want? What do I want to do? Right? We don't always know at the top of our head, so figure it out. What we can do is ask those good questions, evaluate, maybe write down our goals. What do we want? Put them together, you know, and then decide and weigh, just like with value, what's a valuable goal to perceive? What's a valuable way to trade my time? Weigh, right? Is this a valuable purpose to go for? Is this a valuable purpose to live?
Is this the one I'm meant to be pursuing?
We can do that, exactly. And even if you choose a goal, you might not know, okay, do I know with every part of my body that this is my purpose? This is my purpose for being here? And so, one thing to address that it's better to have a purpose, it's better to choose something than to not. Because that could be a big excuse. You know, I don't know what I want to do. You know, I don't know how to spend my time. I don't know if it's a valuable way to spend my time. I mean, a lot of times, you know, just like I talked about when I was talking about insecurity and security, we want things. We want to pursue things. We see other people and we're like, oh, we want to be like that, right? And so we're naturally going to have things we want to go towards, things we want to make and turn into our purpose. And so that's okay, right? Dream a little bit, right? Sometimes we have these goals and, we might be told by people, oh, they're unrealistic, don't achieve them. Like, that's a waste of your time. But let me tell you, it's better to have a purpose than no purpose. Maybe they're right. Maybe they're absolutely right. But it's better to go full steam ahead towards a goal than no goal. And why is that? Is because to pursue something, to actually actively try to live a life of meaning towards something takes discipline, takes strategizing, a plan. And so if you have a goal like that to pursue, right? If you have a purpose that you're like, well, it might seem unrealistic, but let me just go for it, right? Do that with an open mind, ready to learn, ready to grow. And then what happens is you can always, decide, okay, maybe my purpose is somewhere else. And so you can redirect that yourself. Just like the boat, you're already sailing. All you have to do is redirect that momentum somewhere else. And just like pursuing a purpose, you're being constructive with your time. You're also learning you're also...
I'm going to walk you to one half of the stage.
Yes, thank you. You're also, learning the obstacles it takes to have a purpose. You're learning how to be disciplined. You're learning how to plan. So you can take those tools that you're learning already and redirect that somewhere else. And so it's better to choose something and nothing. It's better to go for something that might not be your actual purpose than to say, oh, I don't want to waste my time. Because remember, not choosing a direction is already a waste of time.
It's a choice.
Exactly, and
it is choosing a direction. Not choosing a direction is choosing a direction. And like you were saying, that message is to be in motion. It's easier to switch directions once in motion than it is to get up and roll from a dead stop. But at any rate, you could see the importance of your purpose, and you can see the importance of setting goals, even if you don't know what to make your big aim or big priority, and how your value placement affects that.